Let's talk about all of this even more with our friends and colleagues there. Legal analysts Neama Rahmani and Trey Lavelle, they join us. Neama, Trey, good to see you guys. I can't believe we're here. Neama and Trey, you have been on with me talking about this case for over a year, and here we are, day one of jury selection. Neama, I'll start with you. If you're both the defense and the prosecution, how anxiety-producing is day one of jury selection to get impartial jurors sat for this jury? I know this is just day one here. They're going to wait until, May the 12th here, until this is all said and done. But it's a tall order before them, is it not?
No question, Andrew. No matter how many trials you have under your belt as a lawyer, jury selection and jury deliberations, they can be really nerve-wracking. And here we know that the entire case may even come down to jury selection because you have folks that have very strong views about these issues: celebrity, sexual assault. Some people believe the Me Too movement has gone too far. Others think that the rich and famous get a free pass when it comes to our criminal justice system. So what the lawyers are trying to do is to determine who's going to be a favorable juror, because we know the only person here who really wants a fair and impartial jury is Judge Subramanian. The lawyers want jurors who are favorable to their sides in the arguments that they're going to present during trial.
So, Trey, if you're one of these prospective jurors and you're coming in essentially, blind, maybe you've never even sat on a jury before, that's overwhelming, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're there, you're doing your civic duty. A case like this is high profile. You've heard about it. You probably have some pre-established views of what happened. And you're just, in this quasi-circus getting ready to undergo a huge trial. And so you're listening to the judge, all eyes are on the judge. And most jurors want to do a good job. Most jurors want to weigh the evidence, do their civic duty, do a fair result. But unfortunately, some people have certain things in their lives and certain experiences that really can't be equated with a fair result, depending on what the allegations are. So all of these jurors are sitting in there. They're excited. Most of them probably want to sit on the panel and just following the judge's every move.
So I have to ask, depending on if you're the prosecution there in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District, or if you're Diddy's team of criminal defense attorneys, who does it redound to the benefit of because Diddy is so high profile? The prosecution or the defense, or neither? Neama?
In this country, criminal defendants tend to do better when they are celebrities. That's just the reality of the case. And maybe because I'm here in Los Angeles and Hollywood, that's something that we experience every single day. We've gone after celebrities, I've defended celebrities, and that's just the reality. Some jurors are starstruck by that celebrity factor. Now, I'm not saying that's going to carry the day here. I do believe the government has a very strong case. We've seen many a celebrity convicted in a sexual assault case. But, when you're comparing, Diddy's star factor to an ordinary Joe Schmo, I think that does help the defense. And frankly, there may be some jurors, stealth jurors, that want to get on this panel, like Trey mentioned. Who knows? They may write a book after this 2-month trial is over. They may go on the talk show circuit. So that is another reason. If you're the prosecution here, you have to be very careful. You got to weed out those fans, make sure they're not on the panel.
Yeah, to the point, Neama, especially you and I have discussed this, that really difficult to watch surveillance camera video in the hotel hallway where, Diddy is seen with just kind of a bath towel on, really roughing up and assaulting his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, the R&B star. Cassie here, one of these prospective jurors, described a still image she saw from that video. She described it as, quote, damning evidence. That woman was rejected from consideration. So that just kind of goes to show you, how this is all going. Trey, let's talk about Diddy's defense team. Who are they? Some pretty high-profile names there, right?
Yeah, there's some high-profile names. Garagos is in there. But I think the focus with the team is going to be, the allegations with Diddy, the case itself. The lawyers are very good. But this case is going to be more about the ability to litigate, cross-examine the witnesses, put on your case, which all eyes are going to be on. Because you can have great lawyers, but you can have a bad day of cross-examination. You can have one of your witnesses doesn't do what they're intending to do, and then you're really reeling back. So great lawyers, but that doesn't always bring the day.
And of course, from the kind of journalist perspective, and Lisa Evers at Fox 5 New York, she was inside the courtroom. That's a great perspective. But both journalists and the wider public, we don't get to see inside federal trials here. We rely, you just saw there, on these small courtroom sketches. And so that's kind of how it's going to go throughout the duration of this trial. We're going to do our best here on Live Now to get all of you up to speed here. It's supposed to last about 8 weeks. Back to Diddy's defense strategy, Neama. What, if you could boil it down to just one or two things, is it going to be? Because remember, you and I have discussed too, all of the allegations, civilly and criminally, against Diddy, it's hard to wrap your head around because there are so many accusers, there's so many lawsuits. But this one in particular, what is the defense strategy?
I'm going to give you three, and it's going to be arguing that the victims are fabricating their stories for one of three reasons: money, and we know many of them have filed civil lawsuits; fame; or revenge. And I want to talk about women, and we have all been talking about how the prosecution is an all-woman team, but there are a number of female jurors on the panel. And these are broad generalizations, but there are some female jurors, especially more conservative female jurors, when it comes to these sexual assault cases, they ask themselves, well, I would never put myself in a position where I'd go up to a hotel room, maybe it's a Harvey Weinstein, or, go to one of Diddy's infamous white parties. So those are the jurors that are going to be potentially more skeptical of these types of allegations. So I think that's going to be the defense strategy here, Andrew, to say that this is all fabricated, because many of these claims were raised years after the fact, sometimes even decades. And the fact that some of these civil lawsuits have been filed does support the defense argument that this is extortion or a shakedown. I believe the victims, but this allows the defense to make that argument.
Yeah, Trey, I wanted to ask you this. Obviously, Diddy has been in jail since he was indicted and arrested back in September of last year. We all remember that. I was on the air for that. And then the lengths Diddy's team went to get the massive bail reform package approved by a judge. They were ultimately unsuccessful. Now, Diddy has pleaded not guilty. And of course, you're presumed innocent. You got to go through the trial here. Diddy's team also, though, rejected a plea deal. Do you anticipate down the road with this trial that could be back on the table, that Diddy and his team would agree to something like that to wrap this up quickly, or no?
Well, I never say never, but the chances are, I think Diddy's team wants to get a not guilty verdict or a hung jury here. He doesn't want to serve any time. And we're just going to kind of have to wait and see. Both sides are going to see how the prosecution's cases go, how the witnesses are. That's really going to determine a couple of things. First, will Diddy take the stand? Because if the cross-examination by the defense lawyers of the government is not effective, and they need that he said up there on the stand when he said, she said, he may have to take the stand. And to the contrary, if they do a really good job on the cross-examinations, they're really establishing reasonable doubt, and then they get down to Diddy's case, he may not have to take the stand. And plus, they maybe have a shot of actually winning. So, a plea deal is never off the table. Both sides are going to see how the case goes. But, for the most part, I think his team, they want to go to the end. They don't want him serving any time. And we got the civil cases coming up after this, too. So in some ways, it's going to be impactful.
Obviously, if you're and have been in jail, in the detention center there in Manhattan for now going on 7 months, that wears on you. And age shows, and you can kind of make that out in the courtroom sketches here. Diddy gray in the goatee, in the hair as well. And there's been this kind of weird tangential debate, and maybe you can kind of elucidate this for us about what the defendant, Diddy, will wear throughout the course of the trial. Neama, why is that important? He wore, I have it in front of me, a sweater over a white collared shirt and gray slacks. Why is what he wears important?
Everything is important in a trial, Andrew, and that's why you see, for instance, Diddy's family members, they're in court. Jurors like to see family support for someone who's accused of a crime. And similarly, what they wear is important. You don't want them in prison garb, of course, if you're representing any criminal defendant, because that's just so prejudicial. So you want your client in civilian clothes, but you certainly don't want something extravagant that is going to show the jurors his immense and extraordinary wealth. Even as lawyers, you'll see lawyers maybe change their suit or their watch or their shoes or their belt because they want to be an ordinary person, just like those jurors in the courtroom. They might not drive that fancy car. So all of this is important implicitly when you're trying a case, both in terms of the defendant as well as the defense team.
And just lastly, because I was trying to think, and I was asking my producers here in the newsroom, when was the last time that the public has been offered up the most high-profile celebrity you can think of in a trial of this magnitude? I'm thinking, 2 years ago, Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, or even R. Kelly's trial there in Chicago. That was around the same time here. But since then, I cannot think of such a high-profile defendant. All eyes will be on this. I mean, Diddy is Diddy, and he's been in jail for 7 months. I just want to, before I let you guys go, how are you feeling about how this is all going to go? And the magnitude of it, kind of just as the cultural phenomenon and cultural sensation that Diddy has been in the public consciousness for so long. Neama, to you first.
Well, Trey and I have been doing this for a long time, but Andrew, this is the biggest case that I can remember. Probably since Johnny Depp, but that was obviously a civil case, got a lot of attention. I think this is the biggest criminal case since the O.J. Simpson case in terms of eyes around the world glued to this case. Obviously, it's not televised because there's no cameras in federal court. There's no cameras in New York State court either. But short of that, this is a case that the entire world is going to be watching for the next 2 months.
Trey, lastly to you.
Neema's right. This is a huge case. It's hitting all the elements: celebrity, egregious allegations, evidence that's been trickling out there. Everybody knows about the case. Everybody's heard about it. Everybody has an opinion about it. But the greatest thing about trials like this is you never know what's going to happen. The prosecution has a great case. I believe that, but you never know. So we're going to find some twists and turns. There's going to be witnesses that they're going to surprise us. There's going to be a lot of probably video evidence in this case, a lot of other witness testimony that we haven't heard about. I think it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, Neema's right. This is one of the biggest cases we've had, certainly since O.J. Simpson.
I mean, it seems like, just lastly, and before we go, that you two might be in agreement that for both sides, it's not going to be a slam dunk.
It never is.
Okay.
When you're relying on the testimony of, he said, she said, these sexual assault cases usually happen behind closed doors. One thing Trey mentioned, which is important, that sets this case apart, is really that video evidence. That's the most powerful evidence. We've talked about the Cassie video, but Cassie also said that Diddy recorded these freak-offs. And if that's true, that may be the most damning evidence in the case. It'll be interesting to see what they show, even during an opening statement next Monday.
All right, Trey, Neama, thanks so much for your time. I know we went a little long, and we'll definitely be relying on your guys' expertise very, very soon here. Have a good night.
Nice seeing you.